We don't have anywhere to go anymore, and we know we are running out of drinking water and arable land. We are burning down and drying out the world's most significant genetic havens, from the Great Barrier Reef to the Amazon, at the equivalency of one Belgium per year, or more than 7,500 square kilometers annually. And that does not begin to account for the road effects that expedite the massive shrinking of the second largest tropical forests in the world, those in the Congo. These trends are not diminishing but spiking. Brazil is in a new recession, as is Russia, the former tied to overproduction of soy, the latter tied to oil and gas prices on the global marketplace. And all this not to mention the current devaluing currency in China. So all of these seemingly mundane passing economic ephemera are tied to geography, which in turn immediately declares more facets, moment by moment, of the ecological and demographic crises. I have been trying to get a handle on it with this broken crystal ball, between bouts of huge depression and resurgent appeals from the heart to something akin, to hope that we will make it in spite of ourselves.
You don't sound like you believe it yourself.
We have a lot of issues here, and they are not welcoming with respect to this paradigm shift. So as an ecologist, this all worries me. I am not a politician, but I try to stay on top of the basic headlines because the time constraints are shrinking. Scientists need to be vocal activists. Our biological lifelines are dissipating, and our hopes for the future are narrowing. And this is why I am searching personally, as I know you are, and have been, throughout your entire career.
I think our thinking will change when we think of our existence on this planet in a perspective that goes beyond single lifetimes. An impact on human thinking and behavior motivated by the recognition that we do not just go around once may seem far out. But we should remember that single lifetime thinking is peculiar to modern Western civilization. Traditional people and people in non-Western cultures don't think in these terms. Nor do animals, insofar as we can speak of their thinking in terms of something. When an animal comes into the world, it doesn't think it has come into a single, finite, linear existence, born out of nothing and falling back into nothing. An animal has in its subconscious mind all the experience its species has accumulated in its previous existences. There is continuity in the kingdom of life through many, very many lifetimes. This subconscious memory store is a vast resource that is simply not accessible. If we think that instinct is inexplicable, that veridical intuition is just fantasy. But our connection to one another and to our past is always present, because our mind is a repository of the collective experience of our forefathers and of the entire human species. We possess the collective wisdom of humankind, and that is a fabulous resource.
Yes, we possess the collective wisdom of humankind. But we have to accept the new paradigm idea that this wisdom is not connected with our till now not well-defined subconscious mind, but with our superconsciousness. It is our global consciousness that originates in our superbrains, and in the superbrains of all larger animals.
It is not the single lifetime individual who needs to change, but the individual who is able to draw on the collective resource accumulated in the span of untold generations. The past is present, it is influencing us. Inborn knowledge and spontaneous skills, familiar from the animal kingdom, are not inexplicable and mysterious. They are the accumulated memory of lived experience over many lifetimes. How capable are we to recall the tremendous wealth and draw on it? It is up to us. That resource, that potential wealth, that natural wisdom, is a crucial factor as we confront the life-deciding issues of today's world.
Is this not something Heidegger acknowledged, when he spoke about history, a very specific kind of lived experience?
The concept of accumulated knowledge, acting on us, is evoked by many great thinkers, most clearly and articulately by Carl Jung.
Unquestionably, there are even adverse archetypes and divisions within a collective consciousness as well.
Archetype is the key concept. Our everyday consciousness is but the surface of our experience. There is more to our mind and consciousness than that. And this is why I don't see ourselves being constrained by the current situation.
So, we are not constrained, but that doesn't contradict the existence of the crisis we are discussing.
It does not, but it empowers and potentiates the possibilities for overcoming it.
You have mentioned the anthropologist, Margaret Mead.
Yes, her famous pronouncement is very relevant. A small group can indeed change the world, as Margaret Mead said. And how big that group is, depends on the resilience of the system that dominates the world. This seems like a paradox. The more resilient the system, the larger the small group has to be if it is to change it, because it has to overcome the system's defenses. For rapidly changing a system, we must have a system that is on the point of collapsing. Then we can create the right kind of fluctuations, inject the right kind of information. All we need is a small group, a small critical mass. Of course, that group can change the system not just for the better, but also for the worse, as we have seen time and time again in the course of the 20th century.
Yes, but today we already know why. The 20th century was the last century of the medieval civilization, which ended, theoretically, 31 years ago. The whole 20th century was very close to this recent evolutionary point of collapsing. And we are still very short after that point. The collapse is still going down to a new period of relaxation.
The Weimar Republic was ready to collapse when Hitler climbed on a beer barrel in Munich. Tsarist Russia was ready to collapse when Lenin showed up in St. Petersburg with a handful of followers. At these points, change could take place in the system, because the system was not sustainable. Hitler and Lenin, and then Mao and Castro and others, did not create the change, they only originated its outcome.
The World Wars I and II, like all other wars after that, till today, are only the further examples of the fluctuations in the dying medieval system of our human civilization. On the other side, also the present movements of the young people, like the Fridays for Future movement, are still similar fluctuations, necessary for a rapid change in the presently dominating minority system of people not interested in any change of their advantageous status quo.
We need a transformation from the group up, triggered by a critical mass. Today's global system is unstable, but we don't know just how unstable it is, so we don't know the size of the critical mass needed to change it. I mentioned yesterday that there are people who will not change, people with a serious vested interest in the current system. There are also people who live at the lowest bounds of survival in deprivation and poverty, they cannot change. But in between these two extremes there is a critical mass that is capable of changing, and is open to changing.
I like that idea of a middle ground. I also think it is a very realistic assessment of the two extremes, as tragic as it sounds. In reality, given that we are very much aware of the billions of our fellow beings who are suffering, and the trillions of others, particularly amongst the aqueous biomes, the hundreds of billions of slaughtered beings, I myself focus continually upon new ideas for amelioration of pain. I particularly think about how we can encourage love of nature in others, to the extent that they don't simply pay lip service to it, but become the change about which their ideals hopefully whisper in their hearts.
They respond to the ideal of universal love.
Absolutely.
And this is actually occurring. It is the cultural mutation that is already underway. It merits taking very seriously.